Many people in Africa make the dangerous voyage for a new life in another country, in Greece, Italy, France, or the UK. But many on the far right have other ideas. They don't want free immigration. They want to turn Europe into a fortress.
Marseille, on the French south coast, is where many migrants from France's former North African colonies have made a life. It's also where National Rally, which believes French and European identity is being submerged by immigration, chose to launch its election campaign for the European Parliament in March 2024. Founded and led for many years by former soldier Jean-Marie Le Pen, it was shunned for decades because of its extreme right-wing rhetoric. When his daughter Marine Le Pen took over, she expelled her father and set out to detoxify its image, gaining media attention and mainstream legitimacy. But she still issued dark warnings about immigration and Islamism, and the alleged failure of France's president to tackle them.
Déconstruire, c'est ébranler notre identité par une immigration de peuplement massive, sciemment imposée jusqu'au moindre village de France. En 7 ans, Emmanuel Macron a déstabilisé les piliers de l'État. Il a encouragé et laissé prospérer les féodalités. Il a plié devant les pressions islamistes qui prennent pied aujourd'hui partout dans la société.
Jordan Bardella, the National Rally's young president, also put immigration at the heart of his party's campaign for the European Parliament.
S'il est un autre domaine accaparé par l'Union européenne et qui engage l'avenir du peuple de France, c'est celui de l'immigration. De toute évidence, ces élections européennes du 9 juin prochain constituent un référendum contre la submersion migratoire.
Bardella is still only in his late 20s. His youth reflects and reinforces the party's appeal to the young who like the anti-immigration message.
Donc je pense que les gens commencent à se réveiller et c'est très bien. Voilà. Les jeunes voient qu'il y a du racisme anti-blanc malgré les grandes paroles des islamo-gauchistes, ça n'existe pas, mais si ça existe vraiment.
Il y a beaucoup plus de personnes jeunes qui votent pour Marine Le Pen en tant que présidente, voire même pour M. Bardella pour le 9 juin par exemple, que de personnes âgées. Je pense qu'il y a les deux, c'est 50-50 je pense. Et puis les jeunes votent de plus en plus pour...
President Macron approved tough new immigration laws last year, and in January he appointed Gabriel Attal as France's youngest ever prime minister at the age of 35.
Je ne veux y voir qu'un seul symbole, celui de l'audace et du mouvement.
Both moves an attempt to drain support from the far right, but it didn't seem to work. National Rally was riding high after topping the French poll in the European Parliament in June. Macron's immediate reaction to call a national election. His gamble that however they vote for the relatively powerless European Parliament, French voters wouldn't want the far right actually running their country for the first time since the Second World War. They didn't.
Merci infiniment à toutes celles et ceux qui partout dans le pays n'écoutant aucun des pronostics.
It was left-wingers from the hastily assembled Popular Front Alliance who celebrated pushing National Rally into third place. Few had expected National Rally to be beaten. It had won the first round of voting, led in the polls, and its leader, Jordan Bardella, had confidently talked of becoming Prime Minister. But now he was left with just bitter recriminations.
Ce soir, en assumant délibérément de paralyser nos institutions, Emmanuel Macron n'a pas simplement poussé le pays vers l'incertitude et l'instabilité, Il prive en conséquence et pour de longs mois les Français de toute réponse à leurs difficultés quotidiennes.
The surprise nature of the left's win, a testament to the strength of the far right, which still gained dozens of seats and still has its eye on the French presidency in 2 years.
So there is a clear path for a Le Pen success in 2027. It is less likely today, but there is still a clear path. If the current assembly is complete chaos, if they cannot agree on anything. At the same time, the French public debt is on a totally unsustainable trajectory because interest rates have increased. So if nothing happens until 2027, just paying off interest on the debt will be the #1 spending in France. In that kind of context, Marine Le Pen could arrive and say, look guys, this is not working, I am your solution.
So why has the far right grown so strong in France that it's caused upheaval in the political system and still has a chance of power? Farmers protesting against President Macron's policies certainly played into the far right's hands, as has wider opposition to the EU's environmental policies, which sparked powerful protests by farmers across Europe. But it isn't just farmers who feel angry with Emmanuel Macron. This veteran observer of French politics said the far right had seized on a widely held perception that he's arrogant and out of touch.
There is a sense of anger, very deep in France, a sense of resentment against Emmanuel Macron. And because of the fact that the National Rally is one of the parties that still plays as if they did not belong to the mainstream. So I think that many people in France are eager to try something new, which isn't really new because we've seen them for 50 years. But they have managed to have a very good marketing of themselves. And I think that they are convincing in that way.
But for its supporters, the far right's appeal goes beyond Macron's perceived failings. In Paris, you'll find much of European culture at its most impressive and celebrated, the immense Louvre Museum. Notre Dame Cathedral still being rebuilt after a devastating fire. And nearby, a statue of Charlemagne, the 8th century Christian ruler who was the first to try to reunite Europe since the Romans. Far-right parties say it's that entire European Christian identity that's threatened by immigration. Professor Pascal Perronneau is one of France's leading political analysts.
Alors, la peur de l'immigration, c'est une peur qui est liée à la perte des identités nationales. Beaucoup d'opinions publiques, en France, en Autriche, aux Pays-Bas, en Italie, ont l'impression qu'à partir du moment où l'immigration devient extrêmement importante et qu'elle vient également de pays éloignés de l'Europe, eh bien, que ce mouvement d'immigration se traduit par une perte de leur manière de vivre, de ce qu'on appelle l'identité culturelle, l'impression que le vieux monde s'en va et qu'il ne nous reste plus rien, que la société devient une société de plus en plus cosmopolite. Au fond, c'est un mouvement de nostalgie. La France n'est plus comme avant, les Pays-Bas ne sont plus comme avant, l'Italie n'est plus comme avant. Et c'est ce sentiment qu'un vieux monde meurt qui nourrit en effet l'hostilité parfois, et parfois même des mouvements extrêmement vifs d'hostilité à l'immigration.
About 10% of people in France are immigrants. Many live in suburbs like Paris's Saint-Denis. So it's not hard to find people here who voice deep fears.
Les idées de l'extrême droite opposent à des idées de progrès. C'est un retour en arrière. Et l'extrême droite que je connais, moi, c'est pas l'extrême droite de Marine Le Pen ou de Bardella. C'est l'extrême droite où derrière il y a quand même pas mal de groupuscules. Même s'ils ont fait le ménage chez eux, il y a quand même des groupuscules qui sont rattachés à cette extrême droite. Des groupuscules même dangereux, fascistes.
But even here, the far right found supporters.
La prochaine élection, on voulait que Marine Le Pen gagne.
Marie Le Pen's going to win?
Oui, Marine Le Pen.
Why?
Oui. Pourquoi? Il a mérité. Mais il dit la vérité tout le temps. C'est quelqu'un qui dit la vérité. On n'a pas de droit de réfugié pour voter pour lui.
Marine Le Pen, il aime les Français.
Il aime les Français.
If it's surprising to find views like that here, it may reflect the way French political culture encourages strong identification with the idea of citizenship. For others, though, the shift to the far right is making that idea more problematic.
Does all this debate around immigration make you feel ashamed to be French?
I'm not ashamed to be French, but I'm ashamed of my country. I have to say sometimes when I'm abroad and people ask me, things about my country, I say I didn't vote for them because it's so sad. Our country is, has a very strong image and is seen as the country of the Enlightenment, of the human rights, and seeing how so many people are mistreated, how we are unable to meet our principles is a shame, for real.
For some who identify with France's internationalist values, then, feelings of shame perhaps tinged with relief, for now. For others who see their Frenchness in nationalist or even ethnic terms, a belief that their turn could yet come.
The far right is not the most important story of this election in France, because the most important story is the reconstitution of this Republican France, of this idea that there is a clear border between the far right and the rest. It doesn't mean that the far right is finished. The far right will still be there every single time that people will blurry the line between far rights and normal politics, democratic politics. Every time those lines are blurred, you will give an avenue, a boulevard for the far right to come back. And every time the economy will be managed without thinking about trade-off, without thinking about the long term, you will give an opportunity for the far right to come back.
But if they do take power, a warning. That's where the difficulties really start.
Parce que pour gouverner, il ne suffit pas de désigner des boucs émissaires. Il ne suffit pas de parler haut et fort. Il faut avoir des compétences techniques. Il faut la volonté de rassembler et non pas de diviser les électeurs les uns contre les autres. Il faut essayer d'être diplomate et non pas de manipuler les rancœurs, les colères, les haines. Et donc c'est là où les difficultés vont commencer, parce que ces leaders populistes, ils sont éventuellement tout à fait capables de gagner des élections, ils sont beaucoup moins capables de gouverner.
Well, the far-right National Rally may have lost the chance to govern here. They've been kept out of power by this broad coalition of the left. But the far-right has made significant gains, and they've picked up a considerable amount of support. And they say this is only the beginning.
Might the far-right in Germany copy them, or do even better? That's where we're headed next.
Rosa, who was from Nigeria, was 20 years of age, drowned in the Mediterranean Sea, identified by the survivors of her boat. This is a 22-year-old man called Fisher from Eritrea, who was a stowaway, jumped out of a van and was hit by several vehicles on the motorway near Calais. Someone called Blessings, who was a 26-year-old woman, her body was found on a deflating boat in the Strait of Sicily near Italy. One baby lost her mother, and in that incident, 125 people were rescued. It's heartbreaking stuff. When you walk up the tower attached to this church and you walk up the stairs, you think this is a huge, great big long lantern hanging down 4 stories. But when you look more closely, it's a list of some of the thousands of refugees and migrants who have died trying to make the journey to Europe.
And those words, migrants and refugees, so often hide the story of people. There are 23,000 people on this list in the Church of the Cross in the center of Dresden in Germany. More a recognition of common humanity than a political statement. But Germany provides plenty of evidence of how resistance to migration is shaping Europe's politics. We watched these people landing on Lampedusa, just 80 miles off the North African coast, an Italian island, but with borderless travel in the EU, their ultimate destination could be thousands of miles further north. In Germany, the far-right Alternative for Deutschland Party, or AfD, wants to stop them.
Wir werden weiter überflutet mit illegalen Migranten, die unserem Staat auf der Tasche liegen. Auch das muss beendet werden. Wenn es nicht europäisch funktioniert, dann muss man das auf nationaler Ebene regeln und dafür werden wir uns einsetzen.
When millions fled the Syrian civil war in 2015, Germany's then Chancellor, the centre-right Angela Merkel, was praised for opening the country's borders. But there were also anti-migrant and anti-Islam protests, particularly in East German cities like Dresden. And the recently formed AfD, today a major force in German politics, started its hard-right shift at that time. 9 years later, at the launch of its campaign for the 2024 European Parliament elections, it was clear Merkel's open-door policy was still a galvanizing moment. The start of a policy which they say is being continued and worsened by the current three-party government known as the Traffic Light Coalition.
Merkel hat die Grenzen geöffnet, die Ampel beschleunigt das jetzt alles, die legt den Turbo ein. Und diese Beispiele eben mit der Islamisierung an deutschen Schulen, dass Mädchen, die nur noch zu zweit, die als einzige deutsche Mädchen ohne Migrationshintergrund, nicht muslimisch an einer Essener Gesamtschule sind und als deutsche Schlampen, das ist ein Zitat, das hat das Mädchen erzählt, als deutsche Schlampen bezichtigt werden, geschlagen, geohrfeigt, getreten werden, wenn sie sich nicht Scharia-gerecht anziehen, die sich an niemanden wenden können, die völlig alleingelassen sind von den Pädagogen, von der Justiz, von der Polizei, die ja auch dann eben letztlich nicht machen können, die sich alle wegducken.
Something that clearly resonated with the AfD supporters at the rally. This man seemed to view immigration through the prism of alleged criminality by a tiny minority.
We have so much immigrants here. They are raping children, women, and kill them in Germany. That's happening here right now, and it's gonna be more and more from the immigration politics right now, and that must stop here.
Another was bothered by a perceived lack of integration.
Refugees are welcome, but refugees must sign our culture, my religion, and then they welcome. But it can be that a refugee comes and said, my culture is bad, my religion is bad, and that's our thing. Why we here? But we love our country, we love our religion, we love our culture, and this is the main thing.
As the AfD gathered in the small southern town of Donaueschingen, so too, right outside, did anti-AfD protesters. They fear the party is taking Germany back towards its Nazi past. Protests really took off earlier this year. After it emerged some senior AfD members had attended a conference with other far-right extremists to discuss a master plan for remigrating immigrants. Mass deportations, in effect. The conference took place at this villa in Potsdam, west of Berlin. The AfD said its members' presence wasn't official and didn't reflect party policy. But not far away is this villa at Wannsee, where in 1942 senior members of Hitler's Nazi party planned what became known as the final solution, the deportation and murder of millions of Jews, Romanis, and other so-called undesirables in the concentration camps. For many Germans, the echoes were too obvious, too upsetting.
We're here to show that the majority of people in Germany is not in favor of the resurrection of Nazis.
It is a protest against the far right because during 1933 the Nazi party came to power through a democratic vote, and my hope is that this will never be this time again where far-right party is voted in power.
Adding to the fear, a series of statements by leading AfD figures, like the one by Björn Höcke, a regional party leader who was fined for using a Nazi-era slogan in a speech. And the AfD's demand that Germany stop apologizing so much for its past. This is the memorial to European Jews who were murdered in the Second World War. A sobering place and an important official recognition of guilt in the heart of the German capital. The AfD wants to reverse what it calls this culture of shame. But is it fair to compare the whole party with Hitler's regime, which started the Second World War and murdered millions of people?
Your critics will say you're a bunch of Nazis. You are, aren't you?
Nein, wir sind keine Nazis. Denn wenn Sie sich anschauen, was Nazis gemacht haben, Nazis haben andere Länder überfallen. Wir stehen hingegen für einen friedlichen Ausgleich und für eine Vermittlungsrolle statt für eine Beteiligung an Kriegseinsätzen im Ausland. Ja. Wir haben auch nicht vor, haben das nie gefordert, dass Menschen in Lager eingesperrt werden. Ja. Also wir können das noch beliebig fortsetzen, aber Sie finden, wenn Sie einen klassischen historischen Vergleich anstellen mit tatsächlichen Nazi-Bewegungen, nationalsozialistischen Bewegungen oder eben faschistischen Bewegungen und der heutigen rechten Opposition in Deutschland oder auch anderswo in Europa, da finden Sie keine Gemeinsamkeiten.
This is the number. Every prisoner has a number. The P, the letter P is for Pole. Everybody has any category of, so because again, so we have this bureaucracy and taxonomies. So the Germans liked these taxonomies.
But even those like this Polish historian, who take a more considered view than anti-fascist protesters, can see worrying similarities in language, especially of the two conferences at Wannsee and Potsdam, more than 80 years apart.
If we don't call AfD a Nazi party, and of course I would agree that I wouldn't say it's Nazi party, but here we have the certain historical or cultural connection in this language, for example, of deportation. So this is such an ideological language of justification of political action, even without any mention about the past. This is something which is very worrying, and this is enough for me. I mean that I wouldn't say that AfD is Nazi party, but I would say that this is very dangerous process now, that the party with such a language and with such references is growing, and is even possible that they will be more influential in the future.
About a quarter of Germany's population has a migrant background, often from Turkey, which has strong economic links, something that's added to German cuisine. But AfD politicians have called for restaurants they perceive to be non-German to be pressured off the street. Some right-wing extremists have attacked food outlets directly. The owner of this cafe, a well-known meeting place in an ethnically mixed part of Berlin, believes he was targeted by fascists because of what his venue represents.
Tell me about the attacks on your business.
Ja, in Corona-Zeiten, da waren die hier, weil der Laden war geschlossen. Die wollten mich angreifen, dann waren wir in der Büroebene 4 Leute. Wir sind gegen diese 4 rausgegangen und gerannt und die weggejagt. Einmal haben die Polen Ausländer raus, Immigranten, Asylanten raus, haben eine große Scheibe kaputt gekriegt und Werbetafel. Dann waren die einmal Hakenkreuz an der Wand von Außenseite. So ist dann diese, okay, ich bin bekannter als Faschist. Café ist ein transkultureller Raum. Deshalb ist diese Angriffe, diese Mutprobe, sagen wir so, die Faschisten machen eine Mutprobe und die sind die Wähler von dem AfD.
The AfD enjoys its strongest support in eastern states like Thuringia, with its pretty medieval capital Erfurt. There's an active debate in Germany about whether the AfD should be banned because it threatens democracy. Germany's constitutional watchdog classifies it as potentially extremist and its Thuringia branch as confirmed extremist, meaning it can legally be subjected to covert surveillance. The AfD say that's only because the socialist SPD-led government fears their strength.
Weil der Inlandsgeheimdienst politisch instrumentalisiert wird. Der Inlandsgeheimdienst untersteht dem Innenministerium. Das Innenministerium ist von einer SPD-Frau besetzt. Und der Inlandsgeheimdienst wird natürlich auch politisch geführt. Ja? Das ist das Problem des Inlandsgeheimdienstes. Er ist nicht nach Recht und Ordnung und nach den Gesetzen ausgerichtet, sondern er wird nach politischer Opportunität geführt. Und dazu zählt nun mal leider in Zeiten einer sehr, sehr starken Opposition wie der AfD auch die Oppositionsbekämpfung.
Dresden, the capital city of Saxony, another eastern state where the AfD enjoys strong support. May Day, the 1st of May, is traditionally a day for political rallies in Germany. On one side of Dresden, we found Die Linke, the left party. Just weeks from the EU Parliament elections, they were clear on the danger they believe the AfD represents.
The right doesn't offer anything but emotions. So when we are here now talking about the conditions of work and the money that people earn when they work, the AfD, the right wing, they don't offer anything, no better work conditions. But they only pull the trigger to act against and to give pressure down to people that have less than other people. So this is their main strategy, like to attack democratic institutions, attack human rights, democratic rights, and push against people that are poorer than others. So this is their strategy. This is how they create emotions, because there is someone who maybe is fleeing from a country, from war, and this one is responsible that I feel not good in my home country.
In the main square, we found the AfD themselves, as well as the protesters who try to disrupt them wherever they go. Among the AfD speakers was Maximilian Krah, its lead candidate for the EU Parliament elections. A member of his staff had just been accused of spying for China, and Krah later withdrew from campaigning after saying that not all members of Hitler's notoriously brutal SS were criminals. That led to the AfD being expelled from the European Parliament's most right-wing party grouping. Despite the surveillance, the protests and controversies, the AfD celebrated surging into second place in Germany in the EU parliamentary election, with its strongest support still coming from the eastern part of the country.
The question is, why is AfD stronger in the eastern part than the western part? And this, for my idea, or I think, it has something to do with the transformation phase after 1990. So before eastern part of Germany was GDR, became a post-socialist state, and it meant many transformations. And these transformations created loser, or people lost jobs, lost standing in society, all these things. And so they they started to vote for a protest party. At the beginning was the left party, the post-communist left party, and now it is more the AfD.
The AfD is now hoping to take control of eastern German states, holding elections in the autumn and make gains in national elections next year. But in some other parts of Europe, the far right didn't do quite so well in the European Parliament vote. Among them, the last country on our tour across the continent. Portugal is on the western fringe of Europe, but has played a central role in its history. The capital, Lisbon, is filled with reminders of that, like this 800-year-old church, twice rebuilt following earthquakes, and the nearby square where thousands of Jews were massacred in the 16th century. Portugal's past provides some of the clues to explain why the far right is gaining support there, and also why it didn't happen sooner.
Prime Minister Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, one-time candidate for the priesthood, who rescued Portugal from bankruptcy and became in 1928 its dictator.
Since the fall of the Salazar dictatorship in 1974, Portugal has not had a successful political party of the hard right. Until now. Chega means enough, the party's name and a clever populist slogan designed to unite the disaffected under one umbrella. Its leader, former television football pundit André Ventura, used to be in a mainstream conservative party, but he struck out on his own by first attacking Portugal's long-standing Romani community.
Há uma cultura de facto de violência e de criminalidade que deriva provavelmente das situações também de exclusão e de enfrentamento, porque é uma comunidade que não se quer integrar, nunca quis integrar-se verdadeiramente. Os ciganos estão em Portugal há 500 anos, nunca se quiseram integrar.
In a population of 10 million, there are an estimated 30 to 70,000 Roma in Portugal. Susana Meia Silveira is one of them and an outspoken campaigner for Roma rights.
Eu não compreendo, não entendo como é que alguém pode brincar de ser político assentando-se através do ódio, do racismo e do preconceito. Não, isto não é política viável, isto não é ser político. Isto é iludir as pessoas com aquilo que elas querem ouvir. O que é que as pessoas querem? Portugal está a passar uma fase política muito difícil, muito complicada. E as pessoas querem achar um culpado. Como portuguesa, é uma vergonha. Eu tenho vergonha que outros países olhem para nós e que pensem que esta é a política que se faz em Portugal.
To understand Portugal and Europe's relationship with ethnic minorities and migrants, it helps to go on a short historical journey to this tower on the shore in Lisbon. A key location in what Europeans call their age of discovery.
This is where the Portuguese set sail from to begin exploring the world. And so began the great age of empire, not just Portugal's empire, but so many other European countries as they staked their claims in foreign lands all around the earth and started accumulating huge wealth. But now the tide is turning and it seems the world is arriving on Europe's shores. Our past has become our rather uneasy present. And not everyone is happy about that.
For decades, people from Portugal's former East African colonies have been making a life here without a significant right-wing backlash. But now, migrants, especially Muslim migrants, are coming from beyond the old empire, from Bangladesh, from Nepal and other Asian countries. For some Portuguese, like José Munoz, it's caused a shock, which has prompted them to back Chega.
This is our country. It's not for people who don't like their lives there, come here and do whatever they want. No. And if they want to come here, they have to work, and they have to respect our culture. It's not you go to the Lisbon downtown and you see like, it's Bangladesh, you know? It's not Bangladesh, it's Portugal. So if you don't like this, how it is, just go back to your country.
Hi, hello, hi. Jamie Owen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for doing this. Hi.
Rita Matias, Portugal's youngest MP and Chega's youth coordinator, says a tougher approach is needed.
And in the topic of migration, do you think that it's fair to have what we have here in Portugal? Nowadays, we have people living, 20 people living in small apartments. I think that this is not a society of human rights. People that live in the stores where they work, in people that live in streets. I think that this is not the justice, the social justice that the leftists like to talk. So have quotes, which is something that countries like Canada used to have. It's being realistic, is to understand that a poor country like Portugal can't have the doors super open and say, welcome, come on, come on, come on. But then when people arrive, we don't have nothing to give. This is very irresponsible. Actually, it's irresponsible to Europe as well, because we are the first door of Europe. And if we open the door without filters, we are allowed people to use Portugal as a first country to achieve other countries as well.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from India, in Darjeeling.
Darjeeling, where the tea comes from?
Yes.
How lovely.
Yes.
It's time for a coffee and a cake. You can't come to Lisbon without cake. I didn't know Lisbon was famous for cakes. Go on, after you. You go first. After you, please.
Gita, who works as a childminder in Lisbon, explained why Portugal is such a draw for migrants like her.
Why Portugal? If you could have gone anywhere, you could have France, Germany, the UK, Spain.
Here, because if I work 2 years, I get the residency here for the work permit, and I can apply my family easy.
So it's easier to come to Portugal in Europe than any other European country.
Yes, because here if I get the contract for the work contract, I pay the tax. 2 years for 6 or 7 months, they give the permit for the family bring, for the documents easily.
So it's easy to bring your family to Europe if you come to Portugal.
And settle here is easy than the other country.
And do you feel welcome in Portugal? Do you regard this as home?
No, first I think I need to, my family is together, but the Nepal is impossible because there is not good salary and I cannot comfortable there. I come in Portugal and I work slowly, and I feel here is a better for the life.
Portugal, like most of Europe, has a low birth rate and needs immigrants like Gita to boost its workforce and grow its economy. But hard-headed economic arguments don't always win out.
In the case of Portugal, it's recognized by Portuguese entrepreneurs, by the Portuguese economic elite, that Portugal needs immigration. But of course, one thing is the technocratic approach towards this question. And the other one, of course, is the impact on the political system and on the political agenda. Europe tries to regulate immigration, but in the end, what is important in terms of immigration are national flux of immigration towards certain economies in Europe. So it's a problem that is, in a way, very difficult to solve. And I don't think that we will have a clear European Union answer to the problem of immigration, but one thing is certain: xenophobic feelings against especially non-European immigration will continue for a long time.
Whether they have the answers or not, there's no denying the energy behind André Ventura and his party. Supporters even turning out in the driving rain on the last day of the national parliamentary elections in March. These young supporters were drawn by its willingness to say the previously unsayable.
Porque não temos medo de dizer o que não é politicamente correto. E o que as pessoas querem ouvir, o que as pessoas sabem que está intrinsecamente mal neste país. E finalmente chegou alguém que é capaz de meter o dedo na ferida e dizer: não, nós vamos mudar isto. Nós temos maneira, nós temos planos, nós, se nos derem a oportunidade, nós vamos lá, nós vamos conseguir.
But as elsewhere, portraying themselves as mainstream is key. How important is today for the far right in Portugal?
A importância da extrema-direita em Portugal.
We are not far right, so I don't know what the importance is.
Chega supporters were jubilant on their national election night in March, jumping from 12 to 50 seats and becoming the third largest party. Their hardline stance on migration, coupled with campaigns on the cost of living and alleged corruption among the mainstream parties, key to their success.
Mas há dado desta noite que nós já temos a certeza e que o podemos anunciar aqui. Esta é a noite em que acabou o bipartidarismo em Portugal.
But in June's EU Parliament elections, their vote percentage almost halved. That made Portugal one of just a handful of countries where the EU-wide trend of a surging far right may have slowed. In the UK, though, it's sparking into life. Despite the huge win for left-of-centre Labour in July's election, the anti-immigration Reform Party has won seats in Parliament for the first time and looks set to be a significant force on the right. When Italy turned sharp right 2 years ago, there were fears it was returning to its fascist past. Those fears have not been realised so far. But after Italy, France, Germany, Portugal, the UK and others have all seen a growth in the far right.
L'extrême droite est une force extraordinaire pour dire non. Non au monde tel qu'il va, non au progrès, non à l'Europe, voilà, non à l'économie globalisée. Très bien, ça, elle sait faire. Mais elle dit oui à quoi? Si vous voulez, par exemple, M. Bardella, leader de l'extrême droite française, dit voilà, non à l'Europe telle qu'elle est. Nous allons changer l'Europe de l'intérieur. Mais la France est avec 27 pays dans l'Europe. Et il ne suffira pas que M. Bardella dise « je veux changer » pour que l'Europe change. Donc on est beaucoup dans la pensée simpliste, dans la pensée qui est la pensée de rejet, de dénonciation, mais on ne voit pas du tout quel est le projet de l'extrême droite. Vers où l'extrême droite veut-elle emmener les peuples européens, sauf à les faire revenir au monde d'avant, c'est-à-dire au monde des années 30, au monde des nations qui étaient repliées sur leurs intérêts nationaux et qui se sont affrontés. Comme le disait jadis un homme politique français, il faut savoir très souvent que le nationalisme, le vrai nationalisme, c'est la guerre.
That may seem a long way off, alarmist even, but there is no doubt the rise of the far right is posing big questions for mainstream parties and political institutions right across Europe. We can probably be sure of only one thing. Europe faces more uncertainty, as do the many thousands of migrants who try to make it their home.